You're watching Global Pulse with me, Neha Khanna. What's going on with Donald Trump? That's the question many people around the world, especially in India and the United States, are asking today. The US president is throwing tantrum after tantrum and hurling insult after insult at friend India. On Wednesday evening, Trump first dropped a bombshell, slapping 25% trade tariffs on India and called India's trade barriers obnoxious. In the same breath, he announced that India would face a penalty for buying Russian oil and weapons. The quantum of that penalty has not been specified. Hours later, Trump announced that he had concluded an oil deal with Pakistan, one that would allow Pakistan and the United States to work together on developing Pakistan's oil reserves. Taking the cheap shot, Trump added, maybe Pakistan will also sell oil to India. Subsequently, we learned that the Trump administration had decided to impose sanctions on 6 Indian companies for trading with Iran's petroleum sector. But Trump wasn't done yet. As his inexplicable meltdown continued, Trump posted another statement on Truth Social, his social media platform. He said, and I quote, "I don't care what India does with Russia. They can take their dead economies down together for all I care. We've done very little business with India. Their tariffs are too high, among the highest in the world. Russia and the US do almost no business together. Let's keep it that way." Dead economy, Mr. President? You calling the 4th largest economy in the world and the fastest growing major economy in the world a dead economy? You call India's trade barriers obnoxious. What is obnoxious are your statements hurling insults at India, a country you keep referring to as your friend. Frankly, with friends like you, who needs enemies? Of course, it is also widely known that Trump has a deeply entrenched personal interest in Pakistan. It's not just about oil reserves. Good luck finding those in Pakistan. It's also about certain cryptocurrency deals directly involving the US president's family that are being monitored and protected personally by no less than the Pakistan Army Chief Asim Munir himself. Any wonder then that Munir was invited to the White House by Trump and treated as a state guest just days after the Pahalgam terror attack in India, where 26 innocent civilians were butchered by terrorists sent by Pakistan? India responded to Trump's remarks today with dignity, grace and great restraint, and at the same time sent out an important message. Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal told Parliament, for India, its national interests are paramount. Yes, we know Trump is transactional. We know Trump is unpredictable. But never before has any US president spoken of India in such deeply offensive and objectionable terms, not to mention spouted lies about India so unabashedly. Never before, at least in the last 27 years, has any US president inflicted such serious damage on India-US ties. Certainly not since the 1998 sanctions imposed by the US in the aftermath of India's Pokhran nuclear tests carried out by the Atal Bihari Vajpayee government. But now we are dealing with someone who's often been described as a man-child in the White House. He may be the most powerful person in the world, but he seems to have the maturity and gravitas of a toddler. It is now clear that in order to satisfy his own ego, Trump is willing to set on fire the extremely critical strategic bilateral relationship between India and the United States. A relationship between the world's largest and oldest democracies that has been painstakingly built and transformed over the decades since the end of the Cold War by successive Indian prime ministers and American presidents with unstinting bipartisan support in both countries. Do we dismiss this as just another childish tantrum by Trump, a man who is known to throw a hissy fit every time the world does not dance to his tunes? Or has Trump seriously undermined the India-US relationship with his reprehensible rant? Can the bilateral ties come back from this? Or do we just have to ride out the remaining 3.5 years of the Trump presidency before we can expect any semblance of sanity and maturity to return in Washington? Can there still be a trade deal between India and the United States? While those are all very important questions, here's what we want to ask Donald Trump tonight. Why so angry, Mr. President? Why do your unwarranted onslaughts on India sound so personal? What has upset you so much? Is it really just about trade? Is Trump frustrated with India holding out in the trade deal negotiations, striking a tough bargain and not yielding to his demands? Is Trump frustrated with India over the Indian government categorically stating in Parliament that Trump did not talk to Prime Minister Narendra Modi during Operation Sindoor and had absolutely nothing to do with the ceasefire between India and Pakistan? Is he frustrated because with his desperate efforts to end ongoing wars failing spectacularly, he sees the Nobel Peace Prize he so desires slipping away? Is Trump frustrated because India refuses to yield to his bullying and continues to assert strategic autonomy in its foreign policy, whether it's vis-a-vis Russia or any other country? Is Trump frustrated because India has made it clear that its national interest is paramount and above everything else? Is Trump frustrated because India believes in a multipolar world and not a unipolar or bipolar one, which would best suit the United States? Is he unhappy because he knows that India is a confident and emerging world power and one that cannot be forced to toe his line? Is Donald Trump frustrated because his own MAGA support base is turning on him and deserting him? Is he frustrated because Americans are refusing to forget about the Epstein files and demanding answers and accountability from their president? Just what is making Donald Trump so angry? Why does he sound so frustrated? Why does his rant against India sound personal? Why is he hell-bent on ruining India-US ties? What explains the latest round of Trump tantrums and how should India respond?
Mr. Chairman, sir, the implications of the recent development are being examined by the government. The Ministry of Commerce and Industry is engaged with all stakeholders, including exporters and industry, for taking feedback of their assessment of the situation. The government attaches the utmost importance to protecting and promoting the welfare of our farmers, workers, entrepreneurs, exporters, MSMEs, and all sections of industry. We will take all necessary steps to secure and advance our national interest. Mr. Chairman, sir, in just over a decade, India has rapidly transformed from being one of the fragile five to the fastest growing major economy.
Deal with Pakistan, a trade deal with Pakistan. How do you see that?
I think that they may have some illusions about finding oil in Pakistan. I wish them luck. You remember that we were all one country at one time. I have not seen any reports that there was a great deal of oil to be found in what is today Pakistan. But if the Americans want to look, let them look. I mean, we looked, as you know, we found some oil in Bombay High, we found some oil in Assam. But we are importing 86% of our oil and gas needs. So I don't know how much they're going to find. But I mean, look, as far as I'm concerned, let them do what they like with other countries. So the only issue that matters to me is what they do with our country.
So beautifully, and then they'll bomb people at night.
All right, so just what's going on with Donald Trump? Let's try and put that question to our guests. We have a terrific panel of experts joining us on Global Pulse tonight. On the show with me is Ambassador Atul Keshav. He is former US Ambassador to India. He's currently President of the US-India Business Council at the US Chamber of Commerce. He joins us live from Los Angeles. Thanks very much, Ambassador, for joining me on Global Pulse. Let me also very quickly introduce the rest of our panel. We have with us Alexander Tarassio, Principal and Pollster at Signal. He joins us live from Washington, D.C. Ambassador Dilip Sinha, former diplomat and author, is with us on the show tonight, as is Dr. Subhash Chandra Pandey, Special Secretary and Finance Advisor in the Ministry of Commerce in the Government of India. And completing the panel tonight is senior business journalist Anil Padmanabhan. Gentlemen, a very warm welcome to all of you. Since Ambassador Keshav has to leave the show in a few minutes, I will start with him. Ambassador Keshav, welcome to Global Pulse. As if dropping the bombshell of 25% tariffs on India and in the same breath talking about a Russia penalty was not bad enough, President Trump decides to sanction 6 Indian companies trading with Iran. He announces some oil deal with Pakistan, which we are still trying to wrap our head around. And then he goes on to describe India as a dead economy. Like I said at the start of the show, one cannot recall the last time a US president or any world leader had spoken of India in such offensive terms. My question to you simply is, what is going on with Donald Trump? Do you not believe that statements such as these deeply hurt the India-US relationship? Frankly, to even say that there is a lot of anger and outrage across India today over this issue would be an understatement.
Neha, I think that was a question. Look, my sense of this is that you're dealing with a person who has, uses every instrument of negotiations to advance the national interests. And, if you look at the statements that have come out of the Trump administration over the last few months, there's clearly been some concerns about some of the elements of the U.S.-India relationship. And I think what you're seeing now is a degree of frustration that's, bubbling out into the public arena. But let's not forget that India had prime mover advantage on these trade talks. Prime Minister Modi had a wonderful visit to Washington in February. The two leaders issued a fantastic joint statement that was very ambitious. The two leaders agreed that we were going to try to boost trade up to $500 billion a year from the current $200 billion a year, because they knew that it would be good for both countries and for both of our peoples and for free people everywhere. So I think what you're seeing now is, after 3 months of trade negotiations and a deal that we thought was struck about a month ago and not having yet been announced, and with the EU and Japan and Indonesia, Vietnam, UK, and so many others, South Korea, racing ahead with deals, that we're in a point of frustration. And look, I don't speak for the president. I don't speak for the U.S. government anymore. I represent 200 of the largest Indian and American companies working together for a better future for the United States and India. But I think that frustration's come out in public. And this is a point where I would say, as a former official, that, when it starts to get out into public, that's when the leadership level needs to have private conversations. I think that reasonable deals can be struck. The U.S. and India have had some very tendentious negotiations in the past, and we have come to productive outcomes that are good for both of our people. Now's the time for the leaders to pick up the phone and talk and resolve the issue. I think that there's actually quite a lot of advantage for the U.S. and India in concluding this deal. Obviously, you're dealing with a guy who did New York real estate negotiations, which are very different from diplomatic negotiations I did when I was younger. So he's using different tactics. But that doesn't mean that a phone call can't possibly be helpful in explaining the red lines, in coming to a deal that is good for India and good for America.
Okay, I understand, Ambassador, you're a diplomat, you're weighing your words carefully, but you can imagine that, these remarks by President Trump have deeply offended Indians. As I mentioned at the start, many have pointed out how the last time we saw so much friction in this relationship was when the US imposed sanctions on India in 1998 in the aftermath of the Pokhran nuclear test. But fact of the matter is that, over the last several decades, not just years, painstakingly, leaders on both sides have worked towards strengthening and transforming this very critical strategic bilateral relationship with bipartisan support in both countries. You are somebody who's in fact been instrumental in strengthening that relationship, first in your role as ambassador and now in your current avatar. Therefore, does it not hurt you, honestly, to see somebody, in a sense, pouring gasoline over years and decades of hard work? And this comes at a time when the United States clearly sees China as a growing threat. And all this while we thought that India was a counterweight to China, seen through the prism of the United States. But clearly, Trump sees everything very differently. And even if you call this a negotiating tool, my point is, can you really browbeat a country like India into, accepting a deal on your terms by hurling insults?
Well, look, I think it's important for a great nation like India and the United States, frankly, to approach their mutual interests, their shared interests, with a certain degree of dispassionate circumspection. I had a boss a long time ago, Colin Powell, who always said that, you should think very carefully before you act, and you should look through all of the various angles. And look, the world is changing. I certainly recall the era when the United States had a very strong bipartisan consensus about the importance of India. I think that continues. I'm speaking to you from Los Angeles, where we just had our USIBC 50th anniversary special summit, and we brought in so many people who are leaders in media and entertainment, supply chains, aerospace, who are deeply interested and invested in the future of the US India relationship. And that's true in Dallas, it's true in Seattle, it's true all around India, in Chennai and Hyderabad. So we have to be a little bit dispassionate. We have to step back from the brink. Indignation is good for TRPs and TV rankings, but it's not a great way to run diplomacy. And it's not a great way to run international relations. So I think India has to look back, step back and say, all right, where is our greatest source of FDI? Where's the greatest source of technology for leadership in aerospace and defense, semiconductors, artificial intelligence? Where are our people in the diaspora? Where are our financial connections? What does the United States mean to us for our long-term rise in world affairs? What can it do for us, given that we have, adversaries on our borders who do not mean us well? And, look at the context of the US and India being quad partners with shared concerns in the Indo-Pacific, and then see through all of the emotion and the rhetoric and the public messaging and the public negotiating and see what it takes to forge a useful deal. I mean, our negotiators, as I understand it, had essentially brokered the contours of a very reasonable and balanced deal. So can the leaders pick that up, have a conversation, and close it out in a way that not only creates good conditions for both of us and for our business communities and our people, but also lays the foundations for further innovation in economic relations between the United States and India? I think it's important to be a bit cool and dispassionate and think through what it takes to preserve the 25 years of good work that you talked about.
Ambassador, let me ask you this. How optimistic are you at this point in time about India and the United States still being able to strike a reasonable trade deal? Now, you talked about how President Trump may be frustrated over the lack of progress in those negotiations that have gone on for some time now. I believe 5 rounds of those talks have already taken place, and an American delegation will be in New Delhi on the 5th of August for the next round of talks. But frankly, these statements, in a sense, have muddied the waters, as it were. There are also several reports that suggest, and these are only reports, that President Trump has communicated through his team to New Delhi that while the US will, in any case, impose anywhere between 19 to 20% tariff rates on India, in return, President Trump expects that India would commit to imposing zero tariffs on most imports from the United States. That has proven to be one of the sticking points. And also the fact that the Trump administration insists that India should open up its agricultural and dairy markets, something that India is simply not willing to do because it believes it will undermine the farmers' interests and its own food security. Do you believe that these are major sticking points that are coming in the way of the two countries arriving at a deal? And how soon do you think that deal could actually come through? Are you still optimistic?
Well, look, I'm not a party to the negotiations, but from what I've heard, the American negotiators have certainly understood India's red lines and sensitivities on agriculture and on dairy. The dairy issue in particular is one that I'm very familiar with from many, many years of talks between the US and India. So my sense of what has already been concluded in the negotiations is that the agreement is fairly reasonable and balanced. The question now is how to close it. We should also step back and think about the fact that India's relative economic advantage in world affairs will be affected if all of the countries in its neighborhood, if China, EU, Japan, Indonesia, Vietnam, UK, etc., are all stitching up deals to ensure continued access to the American market. South Korea just overnight. Can India afford to not have a deal? I don't know. That's a question for India. It's a sovereign decision for a great nation. My sense is that there's always room for optimism in US India because we have been in some scrapes before. We have been through some tough times, and we've always figured out a way through in order to make an outcome that is good for both of us because we do have shared adversaries. India lives in a terrible neighborhood, unfortunately, with bad neighbors. The US has been helpful to India in the past and will continue to do so, I hope. So this is where, if you let the deal stumble at the finish line, there may be further unknown adverse consequences that can impact America and India in ways that only give comfort to our enemies. And this is why I think the leaders now need to sort it out. They need to talk through whatever the left-right parameters are of the negotiated draft agreement and then close it in a way that continues our path of strategic economic and technological convergence. And emotion is not a helpful way to drive national policy. Obviously, we're showing some of it on social media, but it doesn't necessarily need to be, it is not a necessarily helpful way to conclude a negotiation. So this is where I think a private conversation may actually go a long way toward closing out a number that is favorable for India, closing out terms that are favorable for both countries, and helping us continue our long journey together.
Fact of the matter is, Ambassador, that many would argue that Trump has been far more respectful towards an adversary like China than a friend like India. Final question before we let you go, and I can't not ask you this. You're well aware that just a couple of days ago, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, as well as India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar, spoke in Parliament and stated categorically, contradicting President Trump's claims, where he had said that he's the one who is responsible for the ceasefire between India and Pakistan during Operation Sindoor. The Prime Minister categorically stated no world leader asked India to stop the operation. The External Affairs Minister said there was no phone call between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Trump between the 22nd of April and the 17th of June. Now, there are many, Ambassador, who feel today that following those statements and the clarifications that have come from India and the top leadership, President Trump is acting vindictive and that his rant against India sounds rather personal. This doesn't just seem to be about trade anymore. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, look, I have no direct knowledge of who called whom when, so the leaders' various statements have to stand as they are. But I would note that so many other countries have been able to find some via medium, some way forward with President Trump and the Trump administration. And you can dislike what he said, you can dislike how he said it, I would also caution friends that what the president is saying and what the Secretary of Treasury and the Secretary of Commerce and others are saying is reflective of a strong sentiment in the Republican Party in the United States about our economic standing vis-a-vis the rest of the world. And so these are statements that have been taking place for many months. You know, India came into this relationship, I think, at the very top of the heap. Prime Minister Modi regarded in the same way that the president had affection and regard for Shinzo Abe, for Bibi Netanyahu. And here we are finding ourselves a few months later in a very different situation. Other nations have figured out how to manage the new way that Washington and the United States presents itself to the world. It's obviously very different. It may be a bit jarring. It may be uncomfortable, but it is who we are now. And it reflects a certain feeling of the American voter about the economic developments of the past few decades. The president has been abundantly clear in his pick of Vice President Vance and others for his cabinet that he believes a rebalancing is necessary to put America on a more fair path with its economic partners. So the question is, how do you leverage the situation? How do you manage it? Others have managed it. They have wandered through the labyrinth of the politics and the tone and the content of things to come to a good outcome. And India is a great friend of the United States. It is a great republic, a great democracy. It has a great leader who is well respected all around the United States. And I think that India can leverage all of this to come to a point of closure that doesn't leave India disadvantaged vis-a-vis other American trading partners. And again, America is a $30 trillion economy. We lead in capital generation, FDI, technology, innovation in business, and in so many other areas. We want to walk this journey with India in the 21st century. Again, I don't speak for the US government, I speak from my business association, but from a business perspective, this deal is very, very important for the psychological impact it will have on American companies investing in India, Indian companies investing in America, and both sets of companies working together on the important technological innovation. If the US and India don't lead on AI and semiconductors, electronics, etc., others will,
Right.
and these are not friendly powers.
You know, you've stated some very important and interesting facts. I wish you could be an advisor to President Trump and remind him of these important facts that you've just listed about India and this crucial bilateral relationship, which frankly seems to be under a fair bit of strain at the moment. But on that note, Ambassador Atul Keshav, thank you so much for speaking to us. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you, Neha.
Thank you. All right, let me now go across to my other panelists. Thank you so much for your patience. We appreciate it. Ambassador Dilip Sinha, let me start with you. The question on everyone's mind, what's going on with Donald Trump? He's throwing tantrums, hurling insults at India, really rubbing it in with Pakistan, calling us a dead economy. Of course, he's imposed punitive tariffs. Not just 25% trade tariffs, but talked about an unspecified penalty. What is going on with Donald Trump in your view?
Well, that's very difficult to say because I'm not privy to what happened in the trade negotiations. And despite all the positive sounds that came from both sides, the fact that it ground to a halt was very disturbing. So we don't know whether the negotiations fell apart because of difficulties in coming to a trade agreement, or is it other political issues like the issue of the Operation Sindoor mediation that you mentioned? President Trump has mentioned the issue of BRICS and Russian oil. Are these factors weighing on his mind? But whatever it is, I agree with Ambassador Keshav that for India, well, for both countries, the relationship is very important, but for India, it is particularly important because America is our largest trade and economic partner. And we have to protect this relationship from the tantrums of President Trump. Now, President Trump has jeopardized the global trading system. He has jeopardized USA's relations with the NATO countries, with Canada, with Mexico. The primary problem in global trade has been China's continuing humongous surpluses over the years for decades. And that was the primary complaint that the US had. India has a surplus with the US in trade in goods, but if you take in all other factors, then the surplus comes down considerably. And the fact is that overall in our trade and in our foreign trade, we have a current account deficit. So it is not as if we are a problem in global trade, but yes, the US relationship is very important for us. And I wish that that we tone down our rhetoric and make sure that the relationship that's so important for us does not get derailed by the tantrums of President Trump. So we have
That's
to
well put.
from him and move
okay.
forward. We have just yesterday launched a NASA satellite with ISRO. So our relations in other fields are going ahead, and they are prized. They are very valuable for us, and we have to protect our relationship. And we must take an extra step forward in this if we have to, if it helps in the process. And we should try for that. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Subhash Chandra Pandey, let me come to you now. Ambassador Sinha says we need to protect, we need to ring fence this very important relationship from Trump's tantrums. The question is, how do we do that? Because negotiations have been ongoing. Clearly, there are some obstacles, but it looks like Trump has already lost his patience with India. He's hurling insults. He's gone ahead and imposed some punitive tariffs on us. The question is, how much could these tariffs hurt the Indian economy? And how optimistic are you that we can still arrive at a trade deal which could perhaps offset these tariffs and the so-called Russia penalty? How do you look at it?
Nehaji, first of all, I think this issue of Trump tariffs for India is overblown beyond any sense of proportion. And let us look at some hard numbers to put things in perspective beyond the raw emotions generated through Twitter. The trade policy is not really conducted through Twitter. See, last year in 2024 year, United States imported some $3.3 trillion worth of goods imports, and it is exports were 2.1 trillion. Where India stands vis-a-vis US, our exports were about 86 billion and imports were about 45 billion. So in this scenario, and 45 billion and 90 billion for a $4 trillion economy, the perspective is that these numbers are not as significant as they sound. So that is a sobering perspective. We must be patient despite these provocative statements. And I'm happy to note that our statement, our response has always been measured and balanced, and we still hope to work out a balanced, fair, equitable deal with USA. And I fully agree with Ambassador Keshav that we have a lot of shared interest and strategic considerations to move forward. See, the threats wouldn't work. They didn't work in 1971, they didn't work in 98, and they wouldn't work now. There are certain red lines, as he alluded to, particularly agriculture and dairy, and those are really very, very sensitive sectors. I mean, if I go back deep into the history, if you see 1857 mutiny, it happened because there was an immediate trigger, that a sensitivity about the beef fat and pork in the cartridges of Enfield rifle. So this is just to recall that there are certain sensitivities which touch on such raw notes that no amount of compromise is possible. So a deal would happen, but deal would not happen at any cost because India is not that desperate.
Okay, that's a good point. And you're right that, you know, you cannot have a trade deal at gunpoint. You certainly can't use threats against a sovereign country and hope to browbeat them into signing a deal with you if And when that deal is signed, it'll have to be on both Indian terms and American terms. It cannot be my way or the highway for Donald Trump. But, Anil Padmanabhan, let me ask you this question. Is the Trump tariff issue really being blown out of proportion, as Dr. Pandey seems to suggest? I mean, from most accounts that I have heard and read, 25% tariffs on imports from India can be extremely damaging, if not downright crippling. And then there is that unspecified penalty, so to speak, for doing trade with Russia. Where does that leave us really? How do you see the trade talks proceeding at the moment? The fact that opening up, its dairy sector and agricultural market is really a no-go area for India. That seems to have emerged as a major sticking point. The question is, how do you really find a meeting ground when you're dealing with somebody like Donald Trump, for whom it is pretty much my way or the highway?
Neha, first off, you must discount a lot of these remarks in the context of the fact that President Trump is what we can call an equal opportunity offender. He uses the same language and tone with friends and foes alike. Okay? So that's his style quotient. Obviously, none of us like it or appreciate it, but we have to accept it because he is the president of the most powerful country on earth, okay, which gives him phenomenal leverage. Now, we may quibble with him as to why he's using it, why he's misusing it, etc. But the issue is he does have the power. Secondly, please remember that he got elected on the idea of MAGA, Make America Great Again. So every action of President Trump since then, every headline that he has sought is about MAGA. Okay, so he does not see India as the way we are seeing it. And before I answer your question, thirdly, we live in a post-truth era. So this is an era of if you say something 10 times, then it becomes truth. So if
Yes.
you're looking at being offended, then just look at the debate that happened in Parliament on Operation Sindoor 2 days ago, where you're the leader of the opposition making outrageous and false claims and being offensive at the same time, inside and outside the Parliament. Now, if the Prime Minister of India can deal with that, he certainly can deal with the President of the United States. Now, to answer your question, there is see the don't forget there is you said it in the intro, over the last 2.5 decades in India and the United States have built a strategic rapport with each other, which is unprecedented. Okay, that strategic part very much remains intact, and please remember trade is part of that. Trade is not over and above that. Strategic relationship is not a subset of the trade relationship. It's the other way around. So since that part is intact, these are kind of I think frictions which are avoidable definitely, and certainly nobody plays diplomacy and politics through social media. But like I said, that's a style quotient. So accept that. So I definitely believe a deal will be struck. So all this is posturing to a large degree because please also realize that in the last few weeks he has threatened and got away with outcomes where the other side blinked. I don't think India is willing to blink. I mean, I really don't know what the Indian government is thinking. So, but it is a kind of brinksmanship and a deal. I do believe a deal will be struck. Both sides need it. India probably needs it more. And finally, please remember in any negotiation, you have to have leverage. And the leverage is based on both give and take. In India's case, the good news is we have moved into a situation where we're willing to give and take and not engage in zero sum arguments. Now, our leverage, India's leverage is the future potential that India has, the market. As of now, that market does not exist on the scale that we all like to believe. But everyone is betting on India on its potential. And that finally, my final point is that potential points to one big shortcoming in India. We are just not competitive. So forget about zero tariffs. We have a zero tariffs with Japan on textiles, but there has been no pickup in exports because the quality of your goods just don't match standards. That's the harsh reality. So India just needs to shine the light inside, undertake strong reforms, become competitive, then you see the leverage, then you see the conversation.
Okay, well, nobody said the Indian economy was perfect, but to call it a dead economy, I mean, it's the fourth largest economy in the world, it's the fastest growing emerging economy in the world, and he's clubbed us with Russia, called us dead economies that can go down together. Let me bring in our American guest, Alexander Tharasio, into the conversation at this point. Alexander, what do you make of the rant that we've witnessed, on part of Donald Trump, attacking India so ferociously, going after a country in this manner, a country that he insists on still calling a friend. But frankly, this is not how you treat a friend. As I said earlier, he's actually been more respectful towards an adversary like China than he has been towards, quote unquote, a friend like India. My question is, what do you make of this rant and the fact that many now believe that he is seriously hurting this very important bilateral relationship between India and the United States? It's a relationship that has been painstakingly built over many years and decades, and it's almost as if he is wielding a sledgehammer here.
Well, I certainly agree that it is like he's wielding a sledgehammer. That's how Donald Trump likes to operate. And I've been encouraged listening to all the guests before me that none of them particularly seem to think that this will hurt the relationship. And I don't think that it will either. This is simply how Donald Trump talks. It's how he engages with friends and foes alike, although more often friends than foes. He tends to be a little bit more diplomatic with people that are farther away, rhetorically. And this may be a sign that India and the United States are actually getting closer together, because the way that he's talking is similar to how he talked about the EU, similar to how he talked about Canada. And so you could take that as a good sign. I do, because I don't think that the fundamentals of the relationship are such that the United States and India will or should drift apart. And another takeaway that I want to contribute to the conversation as a pollster, one of the very few people that's willing to start a fight and to make things uncomfortable in whatever conversation he happens to be in. He's followed that in New York real estate. He wrote a book about it, The Art of the Deal, and he's doing that here. He does that when he's deal making, and it's because it works, because other people don't like to be uncomfortable, and so they will seek methods to make themselves comfortable. And so I'm not going to give any advice to anybody trying to make a deal with Donald Trump. It would probably be bad advice. Donald Trump is a great deal maker. But just take a look at what he has done in other circumstances. And I think most people are familiar with him. Everybody in the world essentially knows who he is and knows how he operates. And so people don't need to be terribly bothered. And one final point that I want to make is that Donald Trump is incredibly powerful politically in the United States right now. That doesn't mean that he's without any political challenges. He certainly has them, but he has more of an opportunity to reshape the political landscape in the US and internationally than any president in living memory, and he's taking advantage of that, and he has already done that. I think the tariff infrastructure that has been put into place now would have been unthinkable a year ago, and he's getting away with it. He is reshaping politics at home. I think he's going to continue to do that. And so I wouldn't underestimate him, but I also wouldn't roll over either. The United States has to look out for its own interests, and India has to look out for its interests too. Donald Trump respects strong negotiators. And so I hope that whatever deal comes out of this, I'm confident there will be one, because it's in the interests of both countries. But whatever deal comes out, I think should reflect the best interests of both.
Well, let's certainly hope so. And Alexander, I'd like to amend my earlier statement. I had said that as far as the India-US relationship is concerned, President Trump is wielding a sledgehammer. I think he is actually swinging a wrecking ball. That's what he is doing to this very important relationship. Let me take this back to Ambassador Dilip Sinha. Ambassador Sinha, Anil Padmanabhan and others make the point that this is really now a game of brinksmanship. Who blinks first? Donald Trump calls himself the best deal maker in the world, the toughest negotiator in the world. Though many would argue that you can hardly browbeat a country like India into signing on the dotted line. And if that's what he's trying to do, it's really not going to work. My question to you is, what is the way ahead? While Indian negotiators deal with American negotiators and Donald Trump with the next round of trade talks slated to take place on the 5th of August, what do you think is the way forward? Is it very important, would you say, for India to stand its ground and send out a clear message to Donald Trump that while we respect your concerns and what you're trying to do for your country in placing America first, but we are going to ferociously safeguard our own national interests as well?
Well, we have to do a lot of introspection as well. President Trump is not wrong when he says that we are a highly protectionist economy. And as your other participants have said, India's economy is not very competitive. And the reason for that is that we have protected our industries far too long, because of which they have become uncompetitive. So we have to learn to open up. And in fact, President Donald Trump's negotiating strategy gives us an opportunity to do this, because in the earlier system of negotiations where GATT negotiations took place, you had to offer a most favored nation treatment. So if you offered concession to one country, then you have to extend that concession to all other countries. Now, in the new system of negotiations, you are negotiating only with the US, and whatever deal we strike with the US will be confined to the US. No other country can come down and say, look, you reduce duty on agricultural products to the US, therefore now you must reduce it for my country also. That doesn't work any longer in the Trumpian global order. So we can always make concessions specific to the US. We look at our input capacity and we say, okay, we can make concessions here, put quantitative restrictions over there, as we have done in the case of the UK with high-end cars. And we can have limited concessions being made, concessions that will not boomerang on us because of the MFN of the old GATT system. So this is an opportunity for us, and we must take advantage of this. It pleases Donald Trump. He can go back and tell his constituency that he has got a great deal from India, and we can ensure that our damage to our economy will be limited. And in fact, that limited damage will actually induce our own industry, whether it is agriculture or the dairy industry, to become more competitive. Because we have to become more competitive. We cannot afford to have an industry. We can't become a major power with industry that is not competitive globally.
We need to have a more competitive industry, and we certainly need to cut our red tape. I think that is really one of the biggest challenges that companies here in India face, and I'm sure that those are concerns that will be addressed by the powers that be. But let me take this now to both Dr. Subhash Chandra Pandey and Anil Padmanabhan. I have two questions for both of you, starting with you, Dr. Pandey. One, do you agree with Ambassador Sinha, who says that we also need to do some soul searching because we've been far too protectionist for far too long? We need to move with the times and open up a lot more than we've been willing to do so far. And these are the kind of issues that are frustrating the Trump administration. Also, what's your take on reports that Donald Trump, apart from lowering of tariffs by India, also expects India to significantly ramp up its purchases of American energy by tens of billions of dollars annually, and also expects India to buy many more American weapon systems in the years ahead?
Firstly, I agree with Ambassador Sinha to the extent that in certain sectors, certain industries have enjoyed the protection for too long, and that it's time. And some adjustment had already been made in this year's budget, where particularly I would say automobiles and liquor, foreign liquor. These are the two items where our customs tariffs are way out of line. Otherwise, overall, even for US, when we talk of a tariff king, and nothing like that, average is less than 20%, except if we take out these two outlying items. And President Trump has for long been talking about, particularly singling out Harley Davidson as a prime example, because automobile tariffs have been more than 100% or so. So to that extent, Ambassador Sinha, I agree with that, in certain premium segments, automobile, there is a scope, and I'm sure the negotiators have that margin. As far as defense is concerned, I think it is not fair to say that there are legacy systems with us for Russia, but over the years we have diversified, and we are not only importing from Russia, but also from France, US, to name among the few. So it is not the situation that we are solely dependent on Russia for all defense imports, and we are tariff kings on a wide variety of items. So these are a few aberrations which will be corrected once the negotiators sit across the table. As I said, this is not something to be done on Twitter. It's only a negotiating stance trying to browbeat. That's all.
Okay. Anil Padmanabhan, quick two questions to you. Number one, are we too protectionist? Are we the king of tariffs, as Donald Trump calls us? And secondly, of course, he is very upset about the fact that we continue to buy Russian oil and Russian weapons. Donald Trump wants a much bigger share of the pie?
I'll answer your second question first. Donald Trump can't dictate where any country buys their energy needs from. So the fact of the matter is, India's biggest challenge is energy security. So they will go out and strike deals wherever they think it is prudent. So, and the diplomatic fallout of that, India has to address. There is nothing free in this world. Every action comes with a price. Now, coming to the question on protection, see the if you want to reframe this question, I agree with you that tariff protection is no longer. I think Ambassador Sinha mentioned this. He's right. It's no longer the level at which it was in the pre-91 era or even the 90s. It is fairly competitive now, and India has gradually been calibrating in a calibrated manner, lowering the rates. But if you want to understand the lack of competitiveness, look at the PLI scheme. What is the PLI scheme? It says production linked incentives. So they say that we will cover 30%, we will give you 30% incentive on an average. So what is 30%? 30% is basically that lack of competitiveness you're covering for them. It can be logistics, it can be infrastructure, it can be productivity, it can be technology, it can be pure infrastructure. So a host of issues add to that, and of course, regulatory cholesterol. The fact that look at GST, it's been in place for 8 years. You've been debating to go down to a more a kind of streamlined GST structure for the last 2 years. You have a committee in place, but nobody wants to take a call. The state tosses it to the center tosses it to the state. Now this hurts, okay? And all this, even like the trade talks we are talking about now, what does it do? It creates an more immense sense of uncertainty in the economy, which means
Okay.
risk taking becomes that much more difficult. So Indian business is still coming out of the throes of the license Raj. They are not natural risk takers. So if you make an uncertain environment, provide them, they're not going to take the kind of decisions you expect them to take. So India has to shine the light on itself, has to raise competitiveness on a war footing. And this is not just about tariff or anything. It is in a very wholesome manner. It's governance as well as the management principles that our companies operate with.
Certainly, a lot for India to do there, a lot for the Indian government really to look into. But Alexander, as we wrap up this conversation, I'll give you the last word. You said earlier that Trump is in a sense all powerful. You cannot underestimate him. Well, nobody's really underestimating him, but there have been many reports of late suggesting that a lot of his core support, MAGA support base is eroding. They seem to be turning on him or deserting him because they are demanding accountability over the Epstein files, something that is making Donald Trump again, very angry and very uncomfortable. I wonder what you think of that. And secondly, if you were an advisor to Donald Trump, what would you tell him to do, seeing that he is, in fact, really hurting the India-US relationship?
Sure. Well, on the first point, there is certainly movement in the polls. We're seeing that internally. I'm seeing that in other polls in the environment, and I think that's a real phenomenon. It is probably reasonable to tie that to the Epstein files, but it's not entirely. We saw some of that erosion happen a little bit earlier. The big advantage that Donald Trump has is that it's for the most part overstated. There's quite a bit less movement than public polls would suggest, particularly in our internal data and in our public polling data as well, that shows among likely voters, not just adults, not just registered voters, but the people who are going to decide who Congress is in 2026 or who the next president is in 2028, that they are not moving very much in their support for Donald Trump. The other big advantage that he has is that they're not moving to the Democrats. These are still voters on the right, and there's no political alternative on the left. And so Donald Trump is very blessed in having incompetent political enemies. And these are people who are frustrated with a scandal that seems to not be going away. And it's very challenging to prove a negative. And so that's the position that Donald Trump is in. As far as your second question goes, I think that the United States-India relationship is strong. And that for Indians watching this that are considering what the state of that future relationship is going to be, a partnership with America is a good thing. We are a good trading partner. The weapon systems the United States sells are excellent, and you don't have to worry, as in the case with Russia, about us starting wars to grab land from our neighbors, such that we will need those military systems and then not sell them. That is a danger in interacting with the Russians. The US is far more reliable, and it is the strongest economy in the world today. That's why investment is pouring into it. I think India should be in on that. I think it would be good for both countries.
It will be, but Donald Trump certainly needs, I think, good advisors at this point in time. On that note, Alexander Terrasio, Ambassador Dilip Sinha, Dr. Subhash Chandra Pandey and Anil Padmanabhan, thank you so much to all of you for joining me on Global Pulse tonight and sharing your perspective with us on this ongoing Trump saga. Well, certainly a lot happening in Trump land, never a dull moment, but the President of the United States would do well to remember that this is not how you treat a country that you call a friend, that you certainly can't hope to get a trade deal out of India by threatening it and by insulting it. That certainly is not the way to go. If anything, that will only prove to be counterproductive. Well, this is Neha Khanna signing off. Thanks so much for watching Global Pulse.